Deadlift.
Deadlift.
Yes, you got it! Yes!
The deadlift.
Here it is. Rip it! Up! Lock it! There it is!
What a fight! Let's see what the judges say.
Let's go!
You know the deadlift. You're picking something off the floor and putting it back down again. It's the lift that is most simple in principle, but for many, the most complicated in execution. Today, I'll be giving you my personal advice on what it takes to deadlift big weight. From my personal training philosophy, tips, and some cues to help you. All right, we're gonna go deadlift 600 pounds today, maybe a little more.
Maybe a little less.
I gotta go to Costco first. I've got Subway in me. I've got my Alani pink slush. And off we go. So I want to take you through the deadlift workout I did this last week and talk about my deadlift philosophy, how I go about deadlift training, and some tips and cues you can use for your deadlift. I haven't deadlifted in like a month. This is a week after Christmas and New Year's. So maybe it was like 3 weeks, but I squatted heavy a few days before this. So I felt, warmed up, I guess. As a competitive powerlifter of a few years, I take a very minimalist or perhaps a lazy approach to warming up. To me, warming up should be, just that, just getting the muscles warm. If my heart rate goes above 140, I think I'm doing a bit too much. I know if I'm deadlifting 500-600 pounds, I'm going to be in the gym for a while, maybe up to 2 hours, accounting for all the rest time. And I need to just conserve all the energy that I can. This isn't a how-to video. This is just some of my experience and how my journey has shaped my philosophy. If you want a video on deadlift form and how to deadlift, maybe I'll make one day, but Alan Thrall's video is probably my favorite out there. So watch his video. That's the prerequisite to this one. If you don't know how to deadlift, go and watch that and come back here when you've got that down and have been deadlifting for maybe a while. As you saw in the first clip, I just like to get the hamstrings warm. It was like 25 degrees outside, so I kept the jeans on during some of the warm-ups. When the weight is super light, I just do these until my hamstrings feel warm enough. No reason to overdo it, just getting my blood pumping into my hamstrings, my hips, delts, my back. And so I'll just do some reps of 135, 225, 315. Maybe pretty big jumps for some people, but we've got a long way to go. Loading at 405, so things are going to get a little more serious. Okay. Still, I won't use the belt until I get to the upper 500s. Not that I'm obsessed with training without my belt, but I just don't really use it during these lightweight warm-ups. Maybe it helps me engage my core. My all-time PR was 689 in competition. That was the third clip at the beginning.
Lock it! Yippee!
I haven't hit it since. I took a break from powerlifting to lose some weight, but I feel like I got 605 in me on probably any given day. And I did not start here. I was not a natural deadlifter. Here's an old clip from like 2017, and it's not perfect. Things can definitely be cleaned up here, but I definitely was not an expert deadlifter. I wouldn't hit 600 until about 3.5 years later in November or December of 2020.
Got it. Yeah! Go! NANI? Lock out! Yes, sir!
That one just about killed me, and I had back pain for weeks. But despite that was the moment I figured I might want to start competing in powerlifting. So I hired a coach the next year, and he helped me get to like 689 in 2 years. I haven't quite broken 700, though I have deadlifted 722 on wagon wheels at a local strongman competition with straps.
Holy Jesus.
And full disclosure, I typically deadlift on a deadlift bar. Since I have competed in USPA almost exclusively, I do sometimes deadlift on power bars, but I do enjoy using the deadlift bar. This is an Ohio deadlift bar, by the way. If you don't know the difference between the different kinds of barbells, it's time you learn. But the deadlift bar is a little longer, a little skinnier, and it's got a little more bend to it. So in theory, it helps you pull the weight off the floor a little more incrementally. And if you're in a federation that uses a deadlift bar, I highly recommend you at least train for it in your peaking block right before competition. So this is me loading up 545, and this is 93% of 605, which is my goal for this session. So at this point, I'm just doing heavy singles. 605 is the goal for the heaviest warm-up single. It's definitely bro science, but I'm trying to just politely shock my body and my nervous system to start heavy training again after a long period off of deadlifts. I think this is the first single where I'll put on my belt just because I know I'll do 585 after this, which I'll need the belt for. When I do heavy singles for warm-ups, I typically put on my belt for the rep before it's the rep where I think I'll need the belt. For some reason, that just seems to help. It's like I need to feel it with the belt before I need the belt. If I jump right into 585 and that was my first rep with the belt, it would just feel strange. So as this video tries to tackle, what does it take to deadlift 600 pounds naturally or get a big deadlift? The first thing I can tell you is it just takes time. As you've seen, I've been deadlifting since at least 2017, and yeah, it was not ideal back then. My form didn't get cleaned up until about 2020 when I watched more Alan Thrall videos. Mastering that 5-step deadlift was crucial. If you want to get better at anything, you have to do more of that thing. So if you want to do more heavy deadlifts and get a heavier deadlift, you have to do more heavy deadlifts. No accessory is really going to cut it in comparison. Yeah, accessory lifts help and I do them all the time. But if you're not practicing your heavy singles at least a few times a block, I do it every training session, even like an RPE 7 single, it's really hard to tell if your accessory or off-season or volume block works or if it's even really helping. If you noticed, I'm not using straps right now. One thing that tends to give out for me before my back and my legs is my grip. I don't normally do any grip training until it's a problem and I start failing because of it. And honestly, I don't really do farmer's walks or anything like that. I just do more deadlifts without straps. I might hold it at the top a little bit longer. The more specific I can get to the heavy deadlift, the better. So here we are, just did a 585 single. Now 605 is loaded up, and I'll do less cuts here. I want to emphasize that it takes pretty significant rest time, even between these warm-up singles. The memes are kind of right though. I hear all the time from people, if you spend more than an hour or two in the gym, then you're wasting your time. Which I think can be true, but if you're a competitive runner for distance, is anybody going to tell you that you're wasting your time on a trail run for 3 hours? Obviously, it's not quite the same. But with powerlifting, it's a time commitment as well. If you do a heavy single or a heavy set at like RPE 7 or 8 or 2 or 3 reps in reserve, your heart rate is going to shoot up. And you should rest adequately and let it drop before you do your next single or set. Heart health is important, and I do stress the need for increasing your VO2 max and decreasing the time it takes for you to recover. But when you're in the moment, some days that just looks like 4 to 5 minutes between sets. So here, I'm just using some baby powder on my legs. On deadlift, you want the bar to be in contact with your skin throughout the whole pull, and the baby powder just helps decrease the friction between the bar and your skin, which is also the reason I pull my shorts up nice and high to where you see my thighs. And it's not just to see my thighs, it's because if I don't, then I'll be pulling the bar over my shorts, and that gives it more friction and it won't move as well. And if this was a max attempt, then it could severely hinder my ability to lock it out. I'll fast forward here for a moment, just making sure not to touch the baby powder with my hands. That would have the opposite effect that I want. I'll chalk my hands instead to increase the friction between my hands and the barbell. And if you didn't notice, I went from wearing Crocs to just socks, and now I'm in my Converse. These have been my deadlift shoes for years. I ripped out the sole so I have a stable shoe with a flat sole. There's a bunch of information on deadlift shoes. My main recommendation is just don't deadlift in tennis shoes. You want as much stable contact with the ground and your foot as possible. So here we are going for that 605 single, just trying to get in the zone, and this is a way I do feel comfortable with, but it takes mental effort. I'm just waiting for the beat to drop in whatever song I'm playing. Getting ready, loading my hamstrings, getting my grip right, and pulling. And what's this? Decided to do a double. And even that didn't fatigue me too much. I went into the gym with the expectation that because I had taken a few weeks off of deadlift, that this would be harder than it was. But if anything, I discovered I felt more rested than I normally do. So I figured, hey, let's go for another 2 and see how that feels. So I took the hat off for this clip so you know it's a different clip. There's a fine line between undertraining and overtraining. And if you've put in the years of training, you should be able to start thinking retrospectively after each warm-up and after each set how you're actually feeling. My philosophy is your training should be adaptive based on how you feel. Have an idea and a plan, don't be afraid to adapt it. That doesn't mean do what you want without reason. I'm not saying to go off your program all the time and just do max attempts. Have a reason for it. My reason was I felt this was a good load and volume for how I felt that day. I had no doubt in my mind that this is what I should be doing versus what I just wanted to do. So as we go through these next couple of clips, I'm going to show you some specific cues that have helped me significantly improve my deadlift over the last couple years and have helped me feel like I have this kind of weight on any given day. So this first cue made me feel dumb when I learned it, but it's just to flex your quads. Flexing your quads helps you stand up. Just take a slightly knee bent position and do nothing other than flex your quads. This is going to start to force you to stand up straighter. So when you have the barbell in your hand and it starts to slow down as it crosses your knee, just think
Flex your quads.
during that part, and that should help pretty significantly. It also helps teach you not to just think of this as a pull. It's a whole body movement and incorporates all of your muscles. A good cue you often hear is to try and drive your feet through the floor instead of just pulling the bar up with your legs and back. And this next cue is going to look a little sus, but combining it with the quad flex is great. If you're having trouble locking out, push your hips forward. If the barbell was completely stationary and you're almost at lockout, think of that last 10% of the deadlift as a hip thrust movement. The bar may not even get any higher, but you'll be locked out. I'm very peculiar about what I choose as my main accessory movement. Your first accessory, in my opinion, depending on the training block, should aim to strengthen your weak points or your sticking points. A good exercise to demonstrate this and to practice these cues is paused deadlifts. The lockout is always the hardest part of the lift for me, so that's why I decided to work on this session. And the paused deadlift is a great variation. When you pause it at your sticking point, usually just below the knee, it forces you each rep to think about that second part of the pull. So you're going to consciously flex your quads into your hip thrust after the pause. You can also do this with bands to make the weight incrementally harder as you pull up. This really forces you to think about how to lock out each rep. So on what it takes to deadlift is 600 pounds. I can only speak for what it took me. For me, it took years of mastering my technique and understanding my mechanical leverages, doing heavy singles often and treating them like a separate skill set rather than regular sets and reps for training. I guess I'm just advocating being a student of the iron. Not to be obsessed, but to be smart. Maybe paused deadlifts aren't for you. Maybe you're great at the lockout, but need help getting speed off the floor. Your accessory lifts should target those weak points instead. I can't tell you how many times I see lifters just defaulting to Romanians as their only accessory. Use film to your advantage. Identify your weak points and address those. Sure, some people are naturally good at deadlift. I was not one of them. I personally know several people who weigh less than me and deadlift more. It took me years to achieve a deadlift I was proud of, and it still may take me years to reach 700 and beyond. I hope you found this video informative and helpful. If you did or didn't, drop a comment. I would greatly appreciate any thoughts anyone has and topics you're interested in. Consider subscribing if you'd like to see more. Till next time, and take care.
Let's go!